Father in heaven, we come to you this morning grateful. Our hearts are full of love for the blessings that you just give us so bountifully. And during this time of year when we celebrate Jesus' birth, Jesus, God with us, we ask, Lord, that you would help us to experience him fully. We invite you into our service and into our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Let's take a few minutes and greet each other this morning. But I'm glad to see each one of you here inside where it's dry and it's warm, and we are worshiping the Lord together. Amen? If you have tithes and offerings to give this morning, in the back of the pew in front of you, you will see there are some tithe envelopes there. You can take those and fill those out. Also, you'll notice in your bulletin you have this nice little red envelope for our Building Hope campaign. So if you want to contribute to the fundraiser for our school, the big project we have right now is putting a new roof on our school. So if you would like to contribute to that, you can use this lovely little envelope in your bulletin, all right? Also, if you have prayer requests or praises that you want to share, there are prayer cards in the back of the pew there. You can take those and fill those out, and at the end of our service, there will be a time when you can bring those forward. And Pastor Peter and I will take those cards and be praying for them. We believe in praying for each other in this church. I know that there are many prayer warriors in this church. So please make use of those prayer cards. Just a couple of announcements to highlight this morning. Edgemar Pranagos, our men's ministry leader, could not be here this morning, but he wanted me to mention the Media on the Brain seminar. It actually looks like it is happening this afternoon at 2:15 at the Collegedale Church in their fellowship hall. There is a little thing in the bulletin about there, and I believe we have a promo video, is that right? About this seminar.
A majority of Americans actually qualify for having an addiction to media use or media exposure.
What they learned is that what we see with our eyes, our brain interprets it as if we are doing it ourselves, not merely seeing it. You don't even necessarily need to have a particular religious conviction about. As a free-thinking, autonomous human being, you might object very much to some of the things that you're going to hear about how manipulation takes place in a society. He's coming from a secular point of view here. He's saying these producers of Hollywood, they are the high priests of this new secularized religion in our scientifically crafted and engineered society. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy. Where is the hollow and deceptive philosophy of this world today? It's being put out through the entertainment media, and we are called to not be taken captive by it, but rather we are to take every thought captive. If we allow these things into our homes and into our lives, the spiritual realm can make claims upon us based upon what we invite into our lives. Come out from them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing and I'll receive you. But we're going to look at music itself. And how can we understand music as a mode of communication and as a control mechanism? After a week of gaming, what did they find? The prefrontal region of the brain displayed less activity after the week was over. Satan wants to divert us and distract us from our purpose in God. You're uncomfortable with the real you, like the gaming culture we talked about, so you create a social networking persona that's not real. Why is it that we have that sort of lame spiritual experience? Culture's on a constant pleasure-seeking binge. More media, more entertainment, and I'll be happier and less bored. The opposite is the truth. The Holy Spirit comes into our lives and clears out anything that's in between me and God. What comes out the next morning is the truth about God, that He was as close as people said, and He was as beautiful as people said. And I go, wow, I never realized that a spiritual walk with Jesus Christ could be this wonderful.
All right, so again, that's the Media of the Brain seminar happening this afternoon at 2:15 at the Collegeville Church. Also tomorrow morning, there is a men's breakfast at the Collegeville Church at 8 a.m. So men, if you're interested in that, there are more details you can check out in your bulletin there. Also, I just wanted to mention that we will not be having our full church potluck next Sabbath as our normal Sabbath, but instead we are having a Christmas social. In fact, Lupina wanted to mention something about our church Christmas social, and she is dressed for the occasion. Lupina, tell us what's happening next Sabbath.
Now, let me just apologize that the battery is dead. Otherwise, I'd be up here blinging. So, next Saturday night in the Fellowship Hall, what to bring? Soup or chili or dessert to share? We will provide the veggies and the crackers and the cheese, and you will provide the fun by wearing your ugliest, blingiest, sharpest, tackiest sweater that you possibly can own. And we will do the gingerbread houses again this year. This year they will be pre-assembled, so there will be a little bit less activity for you all. Looking forward to seeing you, and hopefully I'll have the battery working by then.
All right, thank you, Lupina. One other thing I wanted to mention here, we had a few membership transfers. We already voted them in, but they weren't able to be here when we officially voted them, and so we wanted to welcome. Some of them could not be here this morning, but I wanted to see, is Brenda Patterson here this morning? There she is. Brenda, come on up. We wanted to officially welcome you and introduce you to the church, and we have a special gift for you here to commemorate the day that you officially joined. Welcome. I wasn't here last Sabbath, and you weren't either, unfortunately. No. But we are here now, and so we have these flowers.
I already have the flower. Thank you. I'm glad you accepted these. I love flowers. I love flowers. Thank you. So we're not going to repossess them. You're not, for sure. You're not coming after church to get this.
And you have a special gift as well. We wanted to introduce you to the church so everybody can see you and get to know you. This is Brenda Patterson. She's a member of our church family, so if you see her after the service today, give her a warm handshake and say, welcome to our church family. Brenda, we're glad that you're part of our family.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right. One other thing we need to take care of, a family that we are voting in today, the second reading for Vaughn, Debbie, and Ashland Williams from the Collegeville Church. They should be with us later at second service, so we can officially welcome them then. All right, do I have a motion to accept this? Okay, there's a motion, a second. All right, all in favor? All right, thank you very much. So we'll be officially welcoming them later at second service. I'll let you read your bulletin for the other announcements that are there. There's a few others that you'll want to take note of. But this time I want to invite the children to come forward for our children's story. And Uncle Ron has our children's story. And he's got a steering wheel with him. So I'm excited to see what this story is about. And as the kids are coming down, they collect an offering. And that goes to help our families at Oaks and also our families who have children in the academy. It goes to help those families with our student aids. Thank you for supporting those families. We appreciate that.
All of you children, come on up. We're going on a bus ride here this morning. Just find a seat somewhere around here. Our bus is very wide, so just find a place to sit. Sometimes the driver, I better take this way. Oh, yeah, there's some. Just sit down and just make yourself. Yeah. I need to sit in the middle that you could. Let me move this way. There we go. If you'll sit over here, there's put your money right there. Thank you, boys and girls, for bringing all of these funds to help our school over here. It's fantastic. Right over there. Right there. Right there. Okay. Are we ready? Okay. Sure. Okay, we're ready to go on a bus ride. Okay? Now, I want to assure you, though, it's snowing outside. I mean, it is snowing so hard. But we're going to get in the, y'all are in the bus now, so let's go. I'm going to sit here in the front like this. I'll get down on my knees, I guess. You ready to go? All right. Okay, here we go. We're going for a ride. Ooh, it's beautiful out there. The snow is, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Everything's just going great. Okay, I'm going to say we have your seatbelts on, but I don't think they put them on the bus. But anyway, we're having a great time. Oh, my. It's getting deeper. The snow is getting much, much deeper. Oh, there's a car off the side of the road and another one over there. But anyway, we're going down through the street. Oh, my. We're having to slow down. It is really getting... The snowdrifts are so high. Oh, my. Oh, I'm so sorry. We have to get out of the bus. We're going to have to walk. Come on, follow me. Y'all get up. Come follow me. Right behind me now. Stay right behind me. And what you have to do now, the snow is deep out here. So, we're going to have to lift up our feet, okay? So lift up your feet here while we go down through the snow. Yes, indeed, we've got, that's good. All right, let's see. Oh, man. Okay. Oh. What do you hear? I hear you. What is that? No, it's not a book. Let me say it differently.
I'm not sure where we went. Hold on just a minute.
No, good try. Okay. Once again. Okay. Somebody's a little dog. Hey, wait a minute. What is that under the bridge there? Oh, look at that. Oh, my. It's cold. It's a little puppy. It's so cold. Yes, you hold him. Hug him. Make him feel better. Anyway. Yes, indeed. Okay. Hey, I got an idea. Do you see Sister Pat back there? Do you know Sister Pat? In the far seat back there? Behind that little boy that's standing on the seat? There she's waiting to. Do you see that? She has a whole bunch of stuffed animals. I don't know what she feeds them, but they are stuffed. Anyway, we're going to go back there. Yeah, let's go see her. Okay. That's right. Okay. Right here. Let's give her the puppy to. Oh, she's going to take care of it. Isn't that great? What is its name, by the way? Poochie. Okay. Anyway, so she's going to take good care of Poochie. Now, let me tell you something. Hey, let me read a statement to you. This is an important. I can get it out of my pocket here. Listen to this. It says the animals were created by God to serve men, boys, and girls, to be a blessing to them. No one has any right to cause
pain to any animals. Have you ever known someone that would hurt an animal? You know, it's terrible. So we don't want to ever hurt the animals. We want to love them and take care of them, okay? And that's from Patriarchs and Prophets, page 443. But anyway, so there we are. Now guess what? Pastor Matthew is going to have a sermon this morning, so we need to go back and find, wait, not this way. The house, you go back, you know where your house is to all don't you? Okay? Your parents. And we're going to walk back there, and you go sit with them. He's got a sermon that is just going to be marvelously wonderful. So you be listening carefully, okay? All right, let's walk back to the snow and go to your different places where your families are, and we'll see you. The Lord bless every one of you. That's right.
Nothing like being a big kid, you know? All right, it's time for our tithes and offerings. And just wanted to say, before I was an Adventist and married this lovely woman over here, I didn't understand what tithes and offering was all about. But after discussions and such, we started to religiously give them. And at one point, and a lot of y'all will remember when cell phones used to have a roaming charge, you know, and such. Well, we had a daughter who had a boyfriend down in Miami and decided to spend 3,000 minutes in 1 month talking to him on the phone. So when we got the phone bill, it was $780-something higher than what we expected. And we're thinking, how are we going to pay for this and such? And so I just prayed about it. And then I had given a couple of my cameras to a guy to sell and forgot all about it. So I turned around and I called him. He said, well, yeah, I sold one of your cameras. And I said, well, but I gave you two. He goes, that's where the other one was. And I said, oh, yeah. And he said, great. He said, I sold that for you, too. And I said, so for how much? He said, $800. I said, I'll be coming to get that check real quick. And so ever since then, we've been giving our tithe and offering on a religious basis, and we have not had any problems giving that check each and every week. It's coming to the end of the year, and we ask that any of you procrastinators to reach this few weeks coming up and fill those offering plates. The loose offering this week is for Adventist Community Services, and we ask that you bow your heads in prayer for right now. Lord Jesus, we come to you this morning. Thank you so much for what you do for us. We ask that you tithe these tithes and offerings that each of these families can give and multiply them, help them to do the services that are needed here, not just in our church, but also in our community. We thank you for each family that's represented here today. And Lord, as always, I ask, bring somebody in front of us this week that we can be a blessing to. We ask these things in your Son's precious name. Amen.
have heard on high.
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains every one, echoing their joyous praise.
Entitled The Birthday of a King.
Our scripture reading this morning is taken from Matthew 1:1. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham.
Amen.
Thank you, sweet choir. I love Christmas music. I've actually been listening to it since like late October. So. But I like this season of the year. It's such a festive time of year. Isn't our church beautifully decorated with these poinsettias? I love it. It's fabulous. I love seeing the lights and the decorations as I drive around my neighborhood. And, ever since I was a kid, I love Christmas. But, when you grow up and you become an adult, it has a different meaning to you as a grown-up. But now I have kids, and so now I get to enjoy watching them participate in all these holiday traditions and enjoy the celebration of this season. And so it makes it extra special. Christmas is the time to be with family, to celebrate, to laugh, to love, to give and to receive gifts, to remember fond memories from the past. So it's a wonderful time of year, right? Good time of the year. And yet, even as I say that, I'm aware that for some people, many people actually, Christmas can be a difficult season of the year. It can be a painful season of the year. It can even cause grief and depression and anxiety. It's a time of mixed emotions. And I know there are some here who have experienced that. It may be that you recently, or even not so recently, lost a loved one. And so this season of the year just reminds you of that empty place that's in your life. It may be that your family is not so easy to be around. So holidays can be stressful. Some have grown up in abusive homes, in dysfunctional families. And so home is not a safe place. You don't look forward to going home for the holidays like some do. Perhaps your own marriage has been shattered by divorce. And so the holiday season, it's complicated. You got multiple sets of grandparents, you got step-parents involved. It's complicated. Or it may be that you simply have no one in your life to share this holiday season with. And so that isolation, that loneliness, especially as you see that it seems like everybody else is surrounded by friends and family, it can be almost unbearable at times. So there are many reasons why the holiday season may not be a time of peace on earth for you. And I want to acknowledge that hard and painful reality this morning. Now, there may be some of you thinking, well, this is shaping up to be the strangest Christmas sermon I've ever heard. Well, maybe it is. But I want to take a look at another side of the Christmas story. This story of Jesus coming from heaven down to earth to be born as a baby in a manger. I want to look at another side of that. Before Bethlehem, before the shepherds and the wise men, before the angel comes to Mary to announce that she will be the mother of the Messiah, before we get to all those stories that we think of when we think of Christmas, there is another story. Actually, many stories that we find at the very beginning in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1. Turn there in your Bibles. Matthew chapter 1. This is the part of the Jesus story that we usually skip, right? The genealogy of Jesus. I mean, it's just a list of names. Boring. It's like reading Numbers or Chronicles. Like, we don't always see the point of all these names. But every one of these names represents a story, a life story. And together, those stories tell us something incredible about Jesus. God in human flesh, who entered into these stories and became part of this family tree that we find in Matthew chapter 1. So Matthew begins his gospel in verse 1. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Now there's a lot of meaning just in that phrase alone. See, Matthew is tracing Jesus' lineage back to some of Israel's greatest heroes. Right? You have David, King David, the greatest king of Israel. And then you have Abraham, the patriarch who started it all, the one who first received the covenant promise from God that he would make his descendants a great nation. By the way, Matthew's writing to a Jewish audience. And he's trying to convince them Jesus really is the promised Messiah. That's why he's tracing Jesus' heritage back to these great figures from Israel's history. You have King David, you have Abraham. He's trying to show, yes, Jesus really is Jewish. He's got the bona fides. And he really is the Messiah. He comes through that right line, the kingly line of David. But there's more to the story than that. Yes, Jesus descended from greatness, from kings and prophets and patriarchs. These people that we look back on as heroes of the faith. But it's also true that Jesus descended from weakness, from deeply flawed people, people who made big mistakes, people who had dysfunctional families, people who lied and murdered and committed adultery. See, Jesus' family tree, just like ours, is fundamentally human. Let me take a look at some of these names here in this story. Remember, each of these names represents a life story. So let's start with the original three patriarchs. You have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Abraham was called God's friend. He was the one who first formed this covenant. God made a covenant with him, promising that he would bless him, and that through him he would bless the whole world. He would give him many descendants, so many they'd be like the stars in the sky. You could not count them. And so Isaac is the son of promise that is born to Abraham and his wife Sarah in their old age. And then you have Isaac's family. Isaac has Esau and Jacob. And Jacob becomes the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. I mean, these are great and noble men, aren't they? And yet think about some of the dysfunction that we can see in these families. Some of these problems, you can actually trace them down from one generation to the next. Serious problems. For example, think about Abraham's problem with lying. On 2 different occasions, when he was staying in a foreign land, he lied to 2 different kings. Deceived those kings because he's afraid. He's there with his wife Sarah, and he says, my wife is a beautiful woman, and the men of this place are going to want to take her for themselves. So he tells Sarah, say to them that you are my sister. Twice he does that. Because he allows doubt and fear to creep in. I mean, this is Abraham, the man of faith, who does this. But his dishonesty and his lack of faith, at least in that particular area of his life, it becomes a generational curse that we can see passed down throughout his family heritage. See, Isaac repeats his father's mistake. He does the same thing. He's in a foreign land, and he tells his wife Rebekah, say you're my sister so they don't come after me. And then look what happens to Isaac. He ends up being deceived by his own wife and son. Rebekah and Jacob conspire together. Jacob disguises himself, pretends to be Esau, so he can go in and receive Esau's birthright blessing. And then because of what he's done, he has to run for his life because Esau's going to kill him. And he probably never sees his mother again. We don't know for sure. The Bible does not say, but it doesn't ever tell us of a reunion. We know that eventually Jacob and Esau reconcile. We know that Jacob is able to come back and to see his father, but there's no record that he ever got to see his mother again. You see, it seems that with each generation, the cost of deception increases. So then we come to Jacob's family. Ultimately, he suffers from this generational curse of dishonesty in his family. Remember what happens to him. His own sons lie to him and deceive him. They plot to kill his son Joseph, the son of his beloved wife Rachel. See, the brothers hate Joseph because he's the favorite. So they're plotting to kill him until Judah, one of the brothers, talks some sense into them and says, hey, well, let's not kill him. Let's just sell him into slavery. And so Joseph is taken captive to Egypt, and the brothers conspire together. They take Joseph's famous coat of many colors, they dip it in goat's blood, and they bring it back to their father and say, he must have been killed by a wild animal. Jacob is heartbroken. Crushes him. Now we know that this story ultimately has a happy ending, right? God brings something good. Even out of the dysfunction, out of this mess, God brings something good. He uses Joseph in Egypt to save his family and many others from this terrible famine that comes. But before that, there's a terrible price to pay for the dishonesty in this family. Joseph goes through a lot of suffering. Jacob suffers. I'm sure the brothers suffered too. Eventually, Joseph and his brothers are reconciled. And Joseph gets to see his father again. But man, talk about family dysfunction. Plotting to kill your own brother, and then selling him into slavery, then lying to your father and saying he was killed. I mean, that's worse than any episode of Maury. But it's not even the worst story in this genealogy. We keep reading through these names. We come to verse 3. Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Now, if you've read this story in Genesis 38, you know that Judah was actually Tamar's father-in-law. See, Tamar had married Judah's son, And the Bible says that was such a wicked and evil man that God put him to death. So as the custom was, Judah gave his second son, Onan, to marry Tamar. That was the custom at the time. A man would marry his brother's widow to take care of her and to provide children for his brother's lineage. So he gives Onan to Tamar, but then Onan dies too. Tamar is left a widow a second time. And seeing what happened to the first two sons, Judah's like, I'm not going to give you a third son. So he tries to stall Tamar. He has a third son. His name is Shelah. But he says, no, wait until he's all grown up. Wait until he's older, and then I'll give you to him in marriage. The time comes, and Judah does not give Tamar to his son. So Tamar takes matters into her own hands. She disguises herself as a prostitute. She deceives Judah. And when it is discovered that she's pregnant, Judah's ready to stone her. The word comes to him and he says, all right, she's a sinner. We've got to put her to death until Tamar can produce the proof. No. Judah, you're the man. You're the father of these children. And so he has to acknowledge, she is actually more righteous than I was because I wouldn't give her to my son so that she was taken care of. Now, if you're cringing a little bit at that story, I'm going to remind you, not only is that story in the Bible, that story is in Jesus' family tree. That's his heritage. This is his family line. Think about that. Judah, he's the father of probably Israel's greatest tribe. This is his story, and it becomes part of the story of Jesus. But there's more. Skip ahead to verse 6. We mentioned King David, right? You have Jesse, the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Oh boy. Remember that story, right? The story of David and Bathsheba. 2 Samuel chapter 11. David is walking on the palace roof one night. He sees this beautiful woman bathing. And he's smitten by her, and so he sends someone to inquire, well, hey, what's her deal? What's her story? I like her. And so the word comes back. She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. But David is undeterred. Despite knowing that she is another man's wife, he sends for her, he has her brought to the palace to satisfy his own lust. And when Bathsheba becomes pregnant, David faces a quandary. What does he do now? He doesn't want Uriah, who's actually a soldier in his army. Think about that. Think how despicable this is. Here's a man in his army, under his command, and this is what he's done to him and his wife. He doesn't want Uriah to find out, so he sends for Uriah. He says, bring him back from the battlefield. I'll have him go home to his wife, and we'll just cover everything up. We'll just pretend this never happened, right? But you see, Uriah is actually a more honorable man than David, at least in this moment. And he refuses to go home to his wife while his fellow soldiers are encamped out on the battlefield. What a rebuke to David. I mean, that's where David should have been, right? He should have been with his men on the battlefield, not taking a stroll on the palace roof. And so David takes extreme measures to conceal his sin. He sends word to Joab, the commander of the army. He says, put Uriah out. The front lines of the battle where it's the fiercest. And when the fighting becomes serious, then withdraw from him. Leave him there to die. It's premeditated murder. But Joab does what David has commanded. Puts David right on the front lines of the battle, or Uriah on the front lines of the battle. And Uriah, along with several other soldiers, by the way, die as a result of this scheme. Bathsheba mourns for her husband, and then David brings her to the palace again. He makes her his wife, and she bears their child. But the chapter ends with these haunting words. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. Now, I know that's not the end of the story, right? Eventually, God sends Nathan the prophet to confront David about what he has done. And David, to his credit, he repents sincerely and deeply. He repents of what he has done. And he writes some of these most beautiful psalms of confession and repentance, like Psalm 51. Create in me a clean heart, O God. But his sin had devastating consequences. First, the child that he had with Bathsheba, that child dies. And this event, it marks the beginning of the decline of his reign. David loses his authority in a certain sense. Certainly his moral authority. Eventually, his own son, Absalom, rebels against him, is able to take the kingdom from him, at least for a time. He does not have the same kind of reign that he did before he committed this great sin. And yet, this is King David. This is the man the Bible says was a man after God's own heart. The Messiah would be called the Son of David. And yet, here is this story, this terrible story. It's part of the Jesus story. It's part of his family tree. You see, the reality is that even the greatest heroes have feet of clay. You have a man like Abraham, a man who's famous for his faith, and yet even he, at times, gave in to doubt and fear. You have a man like David, the man after God's own heart, and yet he does this despicable thing. And these are the good guys in the story, right? If you keep reading through this genealogy, once you get past Solomon, there are not very many heroes left. They just keep getting worse and worse. Some of the wickedest kings in the history of Judah and Israel, they're there in Jesus' family tree. But you see, this dysfunctional family tree, these sordid stories, they tell us two incredible truths about Jesus. The first incredible truth about Jesus is that when he was born as a baby in Bethlehem, it meant that he was coming right down into our mess. He did not think it beneath himself to be born into this dysfunctional family. He was not too proud to be a descendant of Jacob the deceiver, or Rahab the prostitute, or David the murderer, or Manasseh the idol worshiper. Jesus does not think he's too good to come down and enter in for that story. I like what Paul says in Philippians 2 when he's talking about Jesus becoming human. He says, Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Jesus came right down into our brokenness, into our dysfunction, into our mess. He truly became one of us. But he didn't stop there. You see, the second incredible truth is that Jesus entered into our story. This story that is filled with pain and betrayal and abuse and dysfunction and deception and suffering. Jesus enters into that story and he rewrote the ending. Think about, how does this story look like it's going to end? Look at these stories here in the family tree of Jesus. It's this seemingly endless cycle of wickedness and failure and sin and suffering. It looks like there's no end in sight. In fact, the longer it goes, the worse it gets. These generational curses are passed down from parents to children, one generation doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past, until Jesus enters in and he breaks the cycle. Jesus comes into our story and he says no more. He breaks the curse of addiction. He heals the wounds that have been caused by abuse. He puts an end to these generational curses that just keep getting passed from parents to children. And so this story that looked like it would end in miserable failure, suddenly it has a new ending. Where there was once despair and sorrow and emptiness and fear, now there is hope and joy and love and peace. What did the angels say on that night when Jesus was born in Bethlehem? Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace to those on whom his favor rests. That's the story of Jesus. That's what he came to do. See, Jesus did not just enter into the story of Abraham and Jacob and David. He wants to enter into your story. He wants to turn your mourning into joy. He wants to heal the scars in your heart that nobody else even knows about. He wants to come right down into your mess. That doesn't bother him. He's not afraid of it. He's not put off by it. He wants to come right down there with you. Heal your brokenness. Bind your wounds. I love what it says in Hebrews chapter 2. In verse 11, it's speaking of Jesus becoming human to save humanity. And it says, both the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. Jesus is not ashamed to call you his family. Now the thing is, Jesus is not going to rewrite your whole story. He doesn't change your past. He doesn't undo the things that were done to you. But you see, he reframes it all. He takes your suffering, he takes your pain, and he gives you a purpose. As he heals those wounds in your soul, he teaches you how to love other people who have also been wounded. He makes you a channel of his love flowing out from him through you to the world. And so all of that suffering and all the pain that you've been through, it's not in vain. It isn't meaningless. Jesus gives you a purpose. He gives you a new ending to that story. The story that seemed like it would end in miserable failure. Now it ends in triumph. His victory becomes your victory. Because you see, when Jesus entered into this story, he didn't simply repeat the mistakes of the past. He didn't carry on those generational curses. He broke the cycle. See, he's the only man who ever lived who didn't sin. And because of his victory, we can be victorious. He can come into our lives, enter into our story, rewrite the ending. That's what he wants to do for you. See, we were once destined to be lost. Because Jesus entered into our story. Now we are found. Now we are saved. Because Jesus became part of our family, we can be part of his family. So today I want to invite you to let Jesus come into your story. Let him heal those wounds in your soul. Let him reframe the suffering and the pain that you've been through. It's not meaningless. It's not pointless. God doesn't cause the pain and the evil that is in our lives, but he takes it and he uses it for good, just like he did with Joseph. He takes those stories. He gives us a new ending. And if you let him into your life today, you'll experience that power, that transforming power that totally changes your life. So I want to invite you today. Let Jesus come into your life. Let him rewrite the ending to your story. If you want to invite him into your life today, I just want to invite you to stand. We're going to pray. And then maybe some of you, if you want to come forward, maybe there's a burden on your heart. Maybe there's something that you want to give to the Lord today. I invite you to come. If you have prayer cards, bring them forward at this time. Place them in my Bible. We will pray together. Jesus has come to this earth, born as a baby in Bethlehem. He took on human flesh. He became one of us so that he could make us like him. So that his victory could become our victory. Let him into your life today. If you'd like to kneel, I invite you to kneel now as we pray. Lord Jesus, we are amazed at these two incredible truths that not only did you come right down into our mess, not only did you enter into our brokenness and become one of us, but you did that so that you could break the curse of sin and rewrite the ending of our story. We're not destined to a life of futility, repeating the mistakes of the past, carrying on these generational curses. We're not destined to this miserable failure, but instead we can be victorious. We can experience hope and joy and peace and love when you come into our lives. So today, Jesus, we invite you in. We want you to come in and heal the brokenness in our lives. Bind up our wounds. Lord, there's some here today, they've been through hard things in life. Things that you never wanted any of us to experience. There's people who've suffered abuse. There are people who've gone through divorce. There are people who've experienced so many losses. Yet you come into each one of their stories. You become one of them. You enter into their family so that you can make them part of your family. You rewrite the ending to their story. So we invite you in right now, Jesus. Come into our lives. Give us that new and glorious ending to our story. In your precious name we